Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining us today. I am Jen Scopo. I lead our instructional design efforts here at WorkRamp. In a minute, I'll also introduce you to Jess, who is one of my brilliant senior instructional designers. This is part of our Training Thursday series. This is something we do on a quarterly basis where we lean into our knowledge and expertise in training, enablement, learning design theories, live trainings, in-person trainings, which of course today we're going to do a little bit of a combination of both. The idea is that over the next, let's say 25 to 30 minutes, something like that, we're giving you actual tactics that you can grab onto, you can implement into your training immediately, regardless of how experienced you may or may not be in building your own training content and designing training programs. So like I said, I'm Jen. I have been in training somehow about 20 years. That is math I have done many times. It is unfortunately accurate. During that time, I have been a trainer. I've run and created training programs for the individual locations and organizations I was working at. And I led a training team for about a decade for a franchise, which was a great experience, get to train on all avenues and all aspects of a business. And in a roundabout way that landed me at WorkRamp by running a consulting practice for a little bit. Part of this is I have been working at WorkRamp for about 2.5 years now, was able to build this instructional design feature in our organization to provide to you guys. And huge benefit of that is getting to bring on brilliant instructional designers like Jess, who you will also hear from today. So Jess, you want to introduce yourself quickly also?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Jen. Thanks for joining. So my name is Jess Arias. I'm a senior instructional designer here at WorkRamp on Jen's team. I started back in October, so about 4 months ago now. And prior to WorkRamp, I spent the past 10 or so years in learning and development in different capacities as a training manager, content creator, instructional designer, facilitator. You get the gist, really everything in between. So all of that is to say, I have likely been in your shoes at one point or another. I know how important it is to get training right. I know how hard it can be. I have made a lot of mistakes along the way and have learned from them. And so I'm really excited today to share a lot of those tips with you all. So I will pass it back to Jen to kick things off.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. And yes, echo all of that. Made all the mistakes. And that's exactly what we teach you to do, is to not do the same things we did. So today our focus is creative ways to build engagement in training workshops and in courses, so that in person, online. Couple of objectives we're going to achieve today is first looking for ways to leverage unique methods of delivering information in person and online. Create engaging activities to keep learners focused and enhance their learning experience, and incorporate real-world opportunities for applied learning. So by the end of this session today, you will have tactics and strategies to do all of those things. Please take notes as we're going throughout. If you have questions you want us to address, there is a Q&A up on top on your Zoom bar, in addition to the chat. The chat is for general conversation, and the Q&A is where we're going to go to at the end of the presentation. So all of those questions are in one spot. So if you forget, no big deal, but that'd be awesome. So the way we're going to cover all these things today, first, we're going to talk about dynamic delivery, meaning different ways of actually sharing your content. Of course, you can tell people things, they can watch videos, they can listen to things. We're looking for creative ways outside of that, of how you're actually giving them that information initially. Then, as part of sharing that information, how are you bringing that to life, bringing your participants into the experience and really helping them take control of their own learning? As we come towards the end, we'll work with you guys to determine your action items to, again, make sure you can use this information. I hope this will be a great use of your time and it will be energizing and interesting. But more importantly, we hope that you can take this and actually run with it to make a difference in what you're doing every day. And we'll come back at the end to do a wrap up and Q&A. If you have questions that are stopping you from understanding the information in the moment, feel free to drop those in. We'll keep a pulse on them. Otherwise, keep throwing all those questions in and we will get to as many of them as possible towards the end. So let's start with that dynamic delivery. Like I said, these are ways that you're going to present and share information beyond just the standard approach. You've probably done some of these before. Our hope is to highlight additional strategies to utilize some of these ideas and give you something that's going to be relevant regardless of what kind of content you're creating, again, in person or online. So the ones that we're going to go through, we'll talk about these individually in a second. How to use case studies effectively, leaning into the opportunity to have call recordings, some ways to do front of the room demos, group brainstorming beyond just typical conversations, and group teachbacks, and Easter eggs. Knew I had one more bullet point there. So let's talk about using case studies to tell a story. Most often what we see is case studies are either housed on a website, maybe on your internal knowledge base, and it's kind of just provided as, hey, read this and learn this. That's really abstract for learners to utilize and for your team to really get the full benefit of. Case studies are vital to helping your team understand your customer's perspective, to know what's been really effective for customers in the past, how your customers see you as being better and the differentiators from your competitors. And that information speaks volumes to your prospects in helping them see what you're trying to highlight for them, but through a voice that's a peer, seeing it from another customer's perspective. Just giving them a case study to read, even if you discuss it afterwards, is not sufficient enough for them to really get their hands around it. So what you see in the screenshot here is this is just a quick example of how we've used WorkRamp guides to deliver information on a case study. And let's talk about why this is beneficial and how this works. First, this is something you can do online. You can approach it very similarly if you were doing a live workshop or a webinar. You want to use your case studies to bring your content to life. That you want to use this to layer what you've already taught. So let's say in a sales instance, you're teaching how to overcome some of those common objections. Find a case study of a customer who that was their objection. How did you overcome it? What eventually helped them make the decision to choose you moving forward? And really help your learners grasp it as a real concept and not abstractly. Specifically, how it's built in WorkRamp for this example is we really lean into those sections. You can see the bold section headers are the name of the customer. And then every single one of them are broken down the same way. You can immediately click to that customer's background, the challenges they faced, the solution that was provided. You can read the rest of those. You see them up there. This gives them an opportunity to first learn it in a layered manner. So they're really getting piece by piece, understanding all the intricacies of what that case study was. And then later, if I'm live on a call and I know that it was one of these two customers that had this challenge they were facing, I want to use as an example, I can very easily navigate right to that page and find exactly what I'm looking for. And then finally, it's an opportunity for applied learning. So at the end of each section, you're asking the learners to brainstorm how to apply the information. This is often the biggest missing piece of how are they going to capitalize on this and making them think in that moment. How would you tell this story to a customer? Make them record it and tell it. If you're live and in person, make them regurgitate it to you. Make them list out what are the top use cases of when you might reference back this case study in particular. So there's a couple of examples and ways that you can utilize a case study to really layer that learning and deliver the content in a more dynamic manner. Now let's talk about call recordings. First, I am a huge proponent of shadowing live phone calls. There's a lot of opportunity, a lot of learning experiences there. They're building relationships with new colleagues. They're listening to someone live on the fly. They can hear how the whole piece comes together. It is really beneficial to have call recordings to lean on in your training as well. Even if you don't have technology like a gong or a chorus, simply just using Zoom or whatever your platform is and recording those calls and keeping them absolutely achieves the same objective. It really helps you maximize efficiency. So you can select relevant calls to control the learning experience because you know ahead of time what questions did the customer ask, what objections did they overcome, which part of this call is the great example you really want exemplified, and you know that it's an example you want to lean into. The learner can do it at their own pace. So if there is something they want to go back and listen to, or dialogue that was really impactful, or something they have a question on they want to hear discussed again, they can pause, rewind, and resume as needed. And then again, that important third component is to include reflection. So it's not just listen to this, but tell them specifically ahead of time, here are the 3 reasons you're listening to this specific call and what you should be getting out of it. It might be you were just taught how to ask these specific questions to uncover your customer's pain, listen for the questions and how the customer is responding. It might be more general, of you're learning just the general tone of how we present the product. What were some of your observations as to how that was presented? So it's beyond just shadow a call, talk to the rep afterwards, or talk with your manager afterwards. It really builds in some of that interactive dynamic learning where they're able to, again, take control of what they're learning, be more in the moment, and really get the most out of that experience. The next one is to deliver a front of the room demonstration. This can happen on Zoom. This is a little harder to do exactly as intended in an online setting, still achievable using videos and things like that. But this means things like either doing a live role play right there in the moment, having a panel of subject matter experts that you're communicating with. If you're doing something like a role play, it can be where you have the 2 presenters, the subject matter experts, role playing. You can have a member of the audience come up and volunteer to be the customer, or if you want to put them in the hot seat, volunteer to be the employee. Whatever it is, there's a lot of different ways you can do this that bring the learning front and center. And it's less of a 2-dimensional, you're delivering information, but really brings it to life in a really comprehensive manner. This really leans into the concept of showing, not telling. Demos give learners a chance to see it in action versus just hearing it in a lecture. It levels up the learning. That if you're having the group, regardless of who's doing the role play or who's part of the panel, most of your group is acting as a third-party observer. If you're then asking them to deliver feedback on that, it seems like a pretty benign, normal action to take, which it is. I'm glad that's ingrained in how we're delivering content and how we're running sessions. But it really levels up the experience because they have to understand what they're looking for to such a depth that they're watching it happen live. They don't have time to really sit back and reflect. They have to know what was done really well, what could be done better, and how to actually fix it. Really, again, for redundancy, levels up their learning experience. It forces them to get involved. It's really easy to be a passive participant in a live training, even online. If you don't have aspects built in all throughout, which Jess is going to get into in a little bit, that force them to interact, it's really easy to just kind of click through, read things, and move on. Things like a front of a room demonstration give them the opportunity to participate, offer feedback, ask questions, and do those role playing right there in that moment. Now let's talk about group brainstorming sessions. This is also another way that you're putting the group together, that it's not just coming from the facilitator. This taps into several learning styles. It gets them more physically involved. It allows them to regurgitate what they've learned. Hearing it in their own voice and their own words makes their brain receive it better. It soaks in, becomes more innate. It elevates their thinking. Because working together naturally sparks creativity. It improves that critical thinking because you're not just in your head processing it. You're hearing questions that other people have. You're able to ask them questions and discuss it in a group of people with likely the same level of knowledge, but coming from a completely different perspective because of their own experiences, their own education. And it's really just giving them an opportunity to take that knowledge to a higher level while being actively part of it. It's more organic engagement. I really love to encourage kind of the popcorn participation. So I made a comment, I answered a question, and I'm going to throw it over to Denise, and she's going to answer the next question. Could be a little anxiety provoking for some people who hate participating in that type of setting, but it really kind of takes the tone down because everyone is experiencing the same thing, and it really brings everyone into the conversation. So it forces them to be more attentive also. And again, applied learning. Obviously, there's a huge opportunity you want to look for everywhere. Any place you can make them do what you're telling them, it's going to stick. It's going to help them actually execute effectively when they take it out into the real world, which is the entire intention behind training. So creating engaging brainstorm activities to apply the knowledge in the moment where you can then coach and refine their skills. All right, last one on dynamic, oh, nope, second to last one. Why do I keep skipping Easter eggs? Guys, I love Easter eggs. They're coming up next. I don't know why I keep forgetting that they exist. Group teachbacks. This is one of my absolute favorite things to do. It's a great way to bring energy into the room. It's a great way to, again, put it on the learner to really understand, think in the moment, and kind of process out loud. You get to be part of that learning experience. Obvious way to do this in person. You ask questions out to the group. They're yelling the answers back to you. Online, of course, you can have them use a voice recording, the video recording, the text, whatever you want to use to have them tell you what you've already told them. This taps into a lot of different learning styles, sparks learning, particularly for those auditory and kinesthetic learners. It helps make connections. We're going to get really deep into the science of this here for a second. It really solidifies the neural pathways to make learning stick. So as fast as I can explain this, think about it as the first time you hear new information. Quite literally, you're building connections in your brain. That's what all those little squiggles are, and the ones that you can't even see unless you're like an actual scientist of some sort. The very first time, it's like you've put a dirt road down, or like you're the first person to walk through that part of the grass and it starts to flatten. Over time, the more you repeat the same thing, the more you practice it over and over again, it gets more solidified, where eventually it's paved. It's a 10-lane highway, and it's something that is so natural to them. It's not just, I know and understand this, but it's, I get this and I can be a true master of this information. So something as simple as them repeating it back, bringing them into the learning that way, solidifies those neural pathways. So the information becomes second nature. And again, they can eventually reach a level of mastery. And it infuses energy. I've been speaking for a long time. I love being in front of a room and getting the group excited. And it's much better when the excitement is coming from them as much as it's coming from me. So again, you can absolutely do this online, but in person, when you're asking the group questions and you're encouraging, I'm from New York, it's called forcing. When you're forcing them to participate and get those answers, get them to be cheesy and obnoxiously loud about them, they're naturally getting more excited. They're naturally more engaged in the environment. So it changes the pace. It keeps the learners awake beyond just the volume of it itself. And it really just keeps them engaged because, again, they have to pay attention to know what they're supposed to be saying back to you. All right, Easter eggs. We got there. I remembered they exist. Let's talk about them. Easter eggs are things that are hidden in the training. You can do this in any number of ways. For instance, the example you see over here on the right, if you were to hover over that image as you're scrolling through, you'll notice your cursor change because there's a URL hidden behind it. In that case, it's going to open a video, really short video of one of those bloopers and funny moments that happen on Family Feud. If you've never watched that, do. They are cry laughing worthy. Most of them are exceptionally work inappropriate. So make sure you're scanning what you're putting in there. You can put anything. You can link behind text. You can use the answer hint on a question. So that little purple bulb shows up. So when they hover over it, they'll see something written. I put anything in here. They can be fun, random things like that video. I've linked to, hey, here's this awesome dessert recipe. Here's a menu to this really great restaurant you should try out. You're probably sensing a theme. Whatever you want to link out to, you can even make it more work appropriate. That here's your trivia question about work, about anything else. The answer to this question is hidden in an Easter egg throughout this course. So it naturally makes them pay a little bit more attention, read a little bit more closely, look for those hidden links, actually read word for word, accommodating people like myself, your scan reader, who's always just looking through for the high points. It forces them to slow down. You can add incentives. You can make it more engaging and fun. Whatever ways you find to do this, please tell me. I absolutely love hiding these in trainings. It's a way to gamify. Again, use that trivia. You could even give prizes. The first 3 people who find the answer to this question, or tell me what you found. What did it link to? What did you see? It gives them a brain break. So those brief little state changes keep the learners receptive to new information and gives their brain a second to physically process what was just learned before moving on to the next one. And it really encourages adoption. So if learners have a positive experience, they want to come back for more training. It doesn't have to be all fun and games all the time, but the couple of ways where you can incorporate these in and you can look for those, Denise, to answer your question, those opportunities for gamifying where you're giving them answer to trivia questions, you're pointing them, you'll see a couple of these as Jess goes through in a little bit, some knowledge checks. She has a lot of really specific ways to add games into training also. But the point is that it's entertaining, it's interesting, and it's not just a boring, mundane part of their day that they're checking a box because they have to. So that was a lot of detail in a short period of time. Hopefully that gave you some things that you can grab onto and that you're able to leverage to make sure you're delivering your content in a really dynamic, interesting way and finding different ways to blend them together to really make sure that they are getting everything they need to out of that. So I'm going to pass it over to Jess. She's going to pull up her slides and continue through talking about how to bring that content to life. Jess, your show.
All right, thanks, Jen. Super exciting to hear all of that, even as someone who has heard it before. So I hope everyone else found it engaging too. We've covered so much ground so far. You learned about how to leverage those customer stories, demos, brainstorming sessions, and teachbacks, and of course, those Easter eggs to create a dynamic experience. So now we're going to talk more about how to bring that content to life. So in this section, we're going to talk about incorporating knowledge checks to keep your learners following along with the content that you're creating. We're going to go over some creative ways to use social interactions in virtual environments. This is one of my personal favorites. We're going to talk about some tactics for getting learners to get involved by acting out what they're learning. And then some simple ways to gamify learning. I know Jen touched on that a bit. I've got some more tidbits for you that we'll talk about in a second. All right, so let's jump into knowledge checks and learning exercises. The one thing I want to call out here to start is that knowledge checks and learning exercises don't just have to be quizzes that happen at the end of your training. Using these throughout your training can actually create opportunities for those learners to engage with your content as it's being learned. So we can do this in a few ways. One is really reviewing core content. In a live training environment, you probably wouldn't just say something once and move on and never say it again. A skilled facilitator might present that same information in a few different ways. You might repeat it, you might paraphrase, ways to make sure that it sticks. And in a self-paced course, particularly in online learning, this is another way to do this. So for example, you could have a knowledge check question that happens right at the end of maybe a longer block of text after a video, where you're asking your learners to just recall something that they just learned. It can be an easy question. And even if they have to scroll up a few inches to find the answer, that's okay. It gives them a second to think, this point that they're asking me about must be important, so I should go back and figure out what the answer is to it if they didn't catch it the first time. Next is applied learning. So this is where part of the more doing, less telling comes into play. Learners retain a small percentage of what they learn when they are told something. It's only when they get the opportunity to practice it that it actually sticks. So this could mean adding a question as simple as, explain the concept that you just learned as if you were teaching a colleague, or what's your too long didn't read version of what you just read? Or it could be more involved at the end of a course. I think Jen mentioned an example before where you can record yourself delivering a pitch to a client. It gives the learners a chance to actually practice what they just learned and explain it to somebody else. And next, maximize ROE. So ROE means your return on effort. Ultimately, the goal of any training is for the people who take that training to learn something, right? So adding knowledge checks throughout those courses, and this goes for live sessions too, it's going to make sure that you're getting the most out of the effort that you're putting into creating that content, because you know that your learners are learning it the first time without finding out the hard way later on. So let's talk about some virtual engagement. In a world where so many of us are working remotely now, it takes some extra effort to make sure that that social interaction that might have happened organically in an in-person environment is still happening. So there are ways to do it. One is to collaborate. Now, you see in this webinar here, we have our chat going. Most web meeting applications have some sort of chat built in. use it. Encourage your students to share those experiences, comment on what's being presented, ask questions, even brainstorm. I always think that it's a great idea to include this throughout your training. You can also, though, if you prefer, make time specifically for that. So you can say, let's hold off on questions for now. We're going to spend 5 minutes talking about a topic. Let's break out 5 other minutes for us to do a chat about what we just learned. It's a really low pressure way to get your participants involved, and it can help create a fun learning environment, even for people who are, maybe on the shyer side. Okay. You can get insights. So another way that you can incorporate collaboration or social interaction is to use polls. Give learners a chance to express their opinion on something or to share previous experiences. It not only gives them another way to use their voice, but it can also give you insight into your audience and what their experiences are, which can help you tailor your training specifically to them. And here's a tactic you can use that is one of my personal favorites. You can take learning out of the session and into a new environment. So for instance, let's say you have a new hire training, or really any training that's welcoming people that you want to involve other peers into. You can create a thread in Slack or whichever communications tool you use. And as part of their first day of onboarding, when they're probably learning about company values or company culture, you can ask learners to post something to the thread that they connect with. And as part of that same message, ask them to tag someone in a previous response in the thread whose response resonated with them. So not only does it give them a chance to actually interact with others, but it helps that peer interaction by giving someone a shout out. Another way you can do this is using LinkedIn to do the same thing. After a first day, or maybe after a training that you led, you can ask your team to post something on LinkedIn if they're comfortable with it, sharing a post about what their first day was like or what their learning experience was like, and tag someone that they maybe want to give a shout out to. So that's more of a public forum, but it can be a really great way to get your learners involved in some virtual engagement. Okay, so now we're going to talk about acting out. This is the true meaning of bringing your content to life. Incorporating opportunities to act out is really a great way to liven up the environment. Let's talk about how. Get creative. So you can give your learners a chance to step outside of their typical learning environment. I'm all about that, as you can tell, to use their creative brains. Something you can do here is you can ask learners to role play scenarios that use props, characters, and humor. So it's taking those traditional role plays to the next level. For example, let's say your learners just completed a product training. Maybe it was a long training. After the training, you can task them with putting together a 2-minute TED Talk type video or a breaking news segment about the groundbreaking new technology that is just being released. And that groundbreaking new technology, of course, would be the products that they just learned about. So get them to sort of put on a show. You can use a similar approach to take learning to the next level by having them do something that they should, having them act out something that they should not do. So for example, say that they just learned how to deliver the perfect sales pitch. You spent all this time telling them exactly what to do. Now you can ask learners to role play the worst version of a sales pitch, doing the opposite of everything that they just learned. This is going to demonstrate that they have a really solid understanding of what good looks like, enough to flip it on its head. This will also solidify what not to do if there are other learners in the group who are still maybe unsure. Applied learning. The great thing about encouraging learners to act out is that it's a way to help that content stick. So like Jen was talking about before with those neural pathways, this is another way to do it. You could read a million books that teach you or that talk about how to ride a bike, but until you actually practice pedaling, it's probably not going to happen. So this is another way to get that learning to really stick. Okay, so now I know some questions came up about this earlier. It's a topic I'm really excited about. I think gamification is definitely a hot topic in learning and development and training design. So I want to say here that first, you really don't have to spend a lot of money or on expensive technology or really technical things to help gamify your learning. You can do things here and now that are pretty straightforward and fun. So get creative again. You can use real life games to get the group to participate. So for example, you might have seen Mythbusters on Netflix. You can use this in your training by telling your learners something that they then have to try to prove or disprove and explain their process. Other games like this, you could do something like Jeopardy or Heads Up or scavenger hunts, which I love a good scavenger hunt. And all of these are great for this too. There are ways that you can spin it to have your content. There are also others that you can find online, like Kahoot, for example, is a big one. There are also free and easy ones. So in the example that you see here above, the image that's on that screenshot shows a crossword puzzle that I added to a tools terminology training. I found it online for free. It's crosswordlabs.com, shout out to them. And it allows you to embed it into your training. In this example, it's in a WorkRamp guide, but it's a way to have learners test their knowledge in a fun way. So leveling up their learning, games really force you to take the content that you've learned and look at it in a different way to achieve a goal. It increases the learner's ability to think critically because they're talking about the concepts that they learned and applying them in a different context. Moral of the story is that games are a great way to keep your audience engaged. I don't think I have to sell anyone on that. They're awesome. Everyone loves a good game. And it's a great way to do this while they're still learning. And when the learning experience is positive, people are going to want to come back for more. And after all, isn't that what we really want? We want people to engage with our learning content. So this is a great way to do this. So we talked about a ton. We've covered a lot of ground. I would love for everyone to take a second, think about something that you learned today, and think about what is one thing that you can apply right now. What is your first step that you'll take? And if you wouldn't mind dropping that into the chat, let's share some ideas with everyone else. We'll just take a second to do that. Yes, like Jen said, you can change the chat to everyone, and you can keep messaging Jen and I privately if you'd like, but feel free to change the chat to everyone and share some ideas. Using case studies, I love that, Leslie. What's your first step to do that? How can you use case studies? Tell me about some Easter egg ideas. Acting out bad examples. Yes, oh, those Easter eggs, Jen. They really came in handy.
They're so much fun to put in there.
They are. And as someone who has taken some of Jen's trainings, I can validate that it's fun on the learner side too, to get to find all those sneaky links.
Even if you thought they were a mistake that day you messaged me, like, this answer hint went to a video of Schitt's Creek. Was that correct? I was like, yes, it was. Yes. Thanks for finding it. It doesn't have to be work related, just has to be fun and interesting. If you guys come up with other ways to hide Easter eggs or what you would hide or how you would do it, we are always open to ideas because that's always a fun topic everyone jumps on.
Yes, for sure. Jackie, I love that. Adding someone to provide a TLDR for an important topic. TLDR is too long, didn't read, for those of you who are not on the internet all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's me. Yeah. I can say it, but
same. Implementing polls for engagement. Yeah, gamification. Does anyone have any thoughts on what's too little or too many for polls? What have you found in the past? All right.
It's always fun when we ask you questions, you actually have to type an answer to.
Yeah, I realize that it's going to take time. And while you're thinking of that, we can do a recap and then we'll get to some Q&A so we can have more of these. So again, we talked about ways to deliver your content dynamically, bringing your content to life, some training action items that we just talked about, and hopefully you are all getting inspiration from each other here. And we're about to jump into our wrap up and Q&A. So keep those chats going, keep those questions coming. And Jen and I are going to kind of tag team these. Okay, so Mark, highlighting those major topics of discussion before opening up to questions. Yeah, that's something that I think helps sort of thread things from one to another pretty seamlessly. Questions for poll, 5 questions for polls. Nice, Kwanzaa. Hi, Kwanzaa.
Just about to do that too. Didn't want to interrupt you to say hello. A question came into the Q&A on tips on creating case studies. So I've kind of a broad answer, and then let me know if you want more details or if I'm answering the exact question you're asking. So first, obviously, the first most important thing is who you're selecting to do case studies on. I like to pick customers that were either a huge team effort to win, that really took an opportunity, or rather effort on your side to really dig in, really find out what they were trying to achieve, what they were solving for, and how you actually pulled that together. Anything that's a really common challenge that you know your team is going to be able to reference often, or that you came up with a really creative solution for, and really just your big customer advocates, right? Whoever's going to go out there and sell you at any opportunity and talk about how much they love your product and how happy they signed with you. In terms of creating case studies, think about it from the outcome side first, right? We're trainers, that's kind of my default mode of when your team is on the phone, what do you want them to get out of that case study? What do they need to reference? Where is it important to pull in a customer story or a customer example? And then get that information on those clients. We create training on this often. It's usually pretty standard, basic background of the company so they can compare to clients and say, this is in your sector, this is about your size, they were about your stage of growth, whatever it is, to make kind of that first initial connection, what their challenges were, how you sold them on it, any specific results. Of course, that's a huge part of not only did we win this, but it actually was beneficial to them. And really any insights you can get. So any testimonials, any quotes are really some of the key things you want to incorporate. So Haley, if that didn't answer your question, please let us know, we can elaborate, but hopefully that was helpful for a starting point. All right. Give you guys another second to drop any other questions you have in there. I know a few of you were messaging earlier that I think we addressed some of the kind of one-off questions that came through. So that being said, I see something pop up in the chat. Always happens as soon as I do that. Okay, nope, we answered that question. Thank you. Excellent. So great. I hope you guys had got something out of this today, as a good use of your time, have some takeaways that you can actually go back and implement. When you go back and do these, let us know if it works. And if it doesn't work and it completely blows up in your face, you're like, absolutely no one liked doing that, please tell us. Let's talk about how we can fix that, any other creative solutions you can come up with. And of course, we do want to hear when things go really well also, and to make sure we're giving other people the same advice if you guys find it successful. So again, keep in touch. Let us know what works. If you guys ever want to chat about your training specifically, we are always happy to set up a 30-minute call, share some tactics specific to what you're doing, take this, make it more applied, and we'd love to help you guys however we can. So thanks for jumping on today. And Jess, thanks for jumping on with me. This was helpful to do together.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Jen.